Shut Arkham City down. It's out of control.
Shut it down. By the end of tonight, I will be a hero, just like you. Batman.
The Batman Arkham quadrilogy is... don't you mean trilogy? As I was saying, the Batman Arkham quadrilogy is probably the series of games that I have played most in my life. I have replayed them over and over. I have been insane enough to trophy hunt them to 100% on both my PlayStation and my Steam accounts. I have been institutionalized by the insanity of the Arkham subreddit since it began. I was there before the insanity, and I was there when it ended the ones trying to stop it. All this to say that Arkham series really means a lot to me. And while Arkham City is generally regarded as the best Arkham games, usually being called as the game with the best story in the Arkham series, I kinda disagree. Alright, look, I'm just gonna come out and say it off the bat. I love Arkham City, but holy shit, the writing does not stand up when you think about it. A Batman story where the main villain is a C-lister while the big guns take the side role? Oh boy, now that's some good stuff. But no, the C-lister villains, they don't even matter. While the gameplay of Arkham City may be leagues above what we got in Asylum, a lot of the story elements felt underdeveloped and outright terribly handled. And the biggest victim of this is none other than Hugo Strange.
Excuse me?
The game starts off really strong. A lesser known Batman villain who figured out his secret identity and is using that to corner Batman. The idea is very cool. Arkham City itself may be stretching the suspension of disbelief thin, but it's a pretty fun and goofy comic book plotline. The idea of a supermax prison built in a sectioned off area of the city is genuinely intriguing and interesting. It also manages to establish Strange as someone who was able to manipulate the high society of Gotham into creating Arkham City despite all the pushback. Strange really feels like he's in complete control of the situation, and he has Batman cornered from every direction. It puts Batman in this unique position where he can't just punch Strange into defeat and has to actually investigate Arkham City because he really has no idea what's even going on. Unlike the Asylum, which is a location Batman has had years to get accustomed to and plan around, Arkham City is not really his turf at the moment. It's still Gotham, but it's a part of Gotham that's beyond his control and is being controlled by those he goes up against. A part of Batman's character is that he forces his enemies to fight on his terms. He will use any trick he can to get a tactical advantage on his opponent. But to flip that around and have Batman play by the enemy's rules and still somehow come up on top is really interesting. And you can see this ideology in most of the good Batman stories. It's always the ones where he is against all odds and still somehow comes up on top. The starting of the story is probably the highest note in the game. It's such a good start. It really makes Strange feel dangerous. He threatens Batman that he would reveal his identity if he tried to stop him, and then he does nothing with it. That plot point runs out of gas faster than the rate at which my videos fall off. Please don't go. I promise I'm entertaining. Occasionally. But from this point onwards, Strange does not matter a lot. Not really in any significant way at least. Aside from the occasional announcement to give out vague details about the plot and Protocol 10, he just kind of hangs around in Wonder Tower without making an actual appearance in person, while Batman is running around being the Joker's errand boy. Arkham City as a whole is made into a subplot, with plot-relevant information only thrown at Batman at various intervals in the game through Oracle or other characters, such as when Quincy Sharp is thrown into the city and Batman interrogates him. And even then, the story isn't allowed to linger on that plot point because Batman is poisoned and that has to take precedence, so we are forced to rush back to Mr. Freeze. And then Protocol 10 is just kind of relegated to being announcements that Strange makes throughout the story until it just sort of happens. And it's revealed that Strange is backed by Ra's al Ghul. I mean, okay, we already beat this guy several hours ago. So having him be the one who is behind everything, it's really anticlimactic. And it's made even worse considering the fact that this is just kind of revealed to Batman. Batman is first and foremost the world's greatest detective, and the game barely does anything with that. Every single major mystery in the game is just kind of solved for Batman, and he's just directly given the answers to the questions that he should be solving. He didn't figure out what Protocol 10 was, he just kind of found out when it happens. He didn't figure out the connection between Strange and the League of Assassins, he was just told. And he didn't even figure out the Clayface Joker plot twist. See, the reason twist villains work in such stories is usually because you see the protagonist struggle to beat someone over and over. And when they finally do, you realize, oh wait, he wasn't even the main boss? And there's someone even further above him? That's not good. But when you put a villain you already beat behind the supposed main villain of the game, it becomes an underwhelming experience. Especially because, to me, that particular section of the game felt less like an ending and more akin to a mid-game reveal. So I kind of suspect whether this was supposed to happen sometime before or after the race boss fight, but way before the actual ending to the game, and it was changed at some point in development. But that's just me making wild guesses. Even with all of that, I can barely think of much to talk about in regards to Strange in this incarnation of the character because he was barely explored. He comes across as a Far Cry villain with his gloating on the radio that amounts to bravado backed by nothing. And then he is unceremoniously killed off along with Raish so we can get back to the Joker plotline. Which is so unfortunate because Strange is actually a really interesting Batman villain. He doesn't just want to be better than Batman, he wants to be the Batman. They even hint at this during a conversation with Riddler on a recording.
Or maybe you are currently wondering if I know about the secret panel in your closet. How it slides back to reveal what you want most. How you sit, wearing that suit, crying into your hands as you question whether you are really worthy.
And that's just the surface level stuff that makes Strange so wasted in this game. But let's roll back a little bit. The game does some really interesting stuff with Strange too. Let's take the Tiger Guards for example. The Tiger Guards are specifically brainwashed and conditioned by Strange to be a formidable challenge for Batman. And they are. Throughout all the stealth sections of the game, they are the only guards who will not be afraid of Batman, taking away Batman's element of fear. But aside from that, they are kinda just normal enemies. It would be more interesting if we had something similar to Pig's Dolatrons from Arkham Knight, where Tiger Guards would feel no pain, no fear, and you would get swarmed by enemies of different types. That would be interesting. This is not to say that what we got was bad, but using the Tiger Guards to show how twisted and monstrous Strange is would have been interesting. A key aspect of Batman's villains is that they are all a twisted version of how Batman could turn out. The Joker is what happens when you let your one bad day define you instead of using that experience to turn it into a positive force. Two-Face is a representation of Batman's struggle of his dual identity between Bruce Wayne and Batman. And in a similar vein, Hugo Strange is someone who has similar ideals and goals in his mind, but tackles the situation with far more cruel and manipulative methods. Like I mentioned earlier, a key part of Hugo Strange is that he wants to be Batman. On top of that, Hugo Strange is a psychological threat to Batman more than a physical one. The whole story should have him dissect Batman piece by piece by throwing as many villains towards him as he can, just to show him that he is no better than the ones he beats up. By making it so that Strange is intentionally throwing these villains at Batman, we could solidify their place in the main story. And it would be a great way to show that Strange is trying to break Batman by throwing them in his face, trying to chip away at his psyche piece by piece. Instead, what we got was a fairly shallow version of Strange who frankly doesn't even feel like the main antagonist, especially when the game trailers went out of their way to show you how incredible of a villain he could be. This is something that, in my opinion, Arkham Knight did much better than Arkham City, even with the flaws of that game. Scarecrow did exactly what Strange could have done. Over the course of the story, he slowly chips away at Batman's psyche and manipulates his fears and breaks him down. Unlike Strange, who only makes hollow threats, Scarecrow follows through, and while Strange being backed by Ra's al Ghul felt underwhelming, in Arkham Knight, it never feels out of place. The Arkham Knight, despite being the titular antagonist, was never overshadowing Scarecrow or vice versa. And while we are on the subject, the Arkham games really struggled to show Batman's title of the world's greatest detective. Despite Wonder City being so close to Strange's operations, Bruce never questions it or tries to figure out if he's missing larger pieces to the puzzle. Instead, the puzzle pieces are practically given to him when the plot requires it. It always feels like he's being led by the nose into those plot points without having any agency of his own, or any way to make Batman feel like the detective that he should come across as. Strange being an underling to Raish is a massive disservice to the character in my opinion, because it diminishes the threat of Strange being the main villain of the story, and kind of reduces him to a puppet of a villain that we already beat up hours ago. It's so unfortunate that the main story deals with Strange in such a way, because the interview tapes are the best part of Strange. Listening to him dissect and break every villain with his words is a fantastic way to show you just how good he is at manipulation. He chooses every word carefully so it breaks the subjects just the right way. But we never get to see any of that, because the game halfway through just turns Arkham City and Protocol 10 into a background subplot, while the Joker and the Titan poisoning plot takes priority and overshadows the main narrative. An interesting way to have Joker have more of a presence in the story without snagging the spotlight from Strange would have been to use the plot from Arkham City stories about Strange instigating the gang war between Cobblepot, Two-Face and Joker. Having the three gangs be in a state of conflict as a way to distract Batman would highlight Strange more, and while the game did do this to some extent, it's mostly just something that happens in the background and not something that takes priority. I think Strange could have had the potential to be the best Batman villain in the Arkham series, but unfortunately he is so underwhelming and underutilized that I find it hard to call him a good villain in this incarnation of the character. Arkham City had all the elements to be a good psychological and narrative driven Batman game, but losing the focus by prioritizing Joker over Strange, in my opinion, was a bad decision. It made it feel like something was missing. And while I understand the fact that the Arkham series is kind of built upon the relationship between Batman and Joker, I think it's a disservice to other characters when every single Arkham game is trying to bait and switch with the Joker. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like those stories involving Batman and Joker too. Batman's Rogues Gallery is one of the best Rogues Gallery in comic book media. Some of those villains will never see any live action projects or even animated projects because they are so rare. And when you have a chance to explore them in a video game, I think they deserve a chance to be explored, because guess what? We know the next Batman movie will have the Joker. We know whatever next Batman game we get will also reference the Joker. The Joker is always going to be a part of Batman mythos. But characters like Hugo Strange or Killer Moth, these are characters who don't get a lot of focus, and games like this is a great chance, an opportunity to explore them. And while I still think that they got it right in Arkham Knight, where we finally saw a villain who could be a psychological threat to Batman, that's a topic for another day. But that being said, if you like this video, consider liking and subscribing to my channel, it really helps me a lot. Maybe if you are into psychological storytelling and anime, consider watching my video on ReZero. I know that show is a banger. Or maybe if you're interested in more gaming stuff, check out my video on why I think Finn in Spider-Man Miles Morales is awful. That being said, this is Demonically Inspired, signing out.